Let's get started. Whoop, going too far. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Connie Fiems, and I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at Rocksteady Boxing. I'm also a practicing physical therapist for almost 30 years. And my experience is with folks with neurologic conditions. So I'm what you call a neurologic specialist. Prior to my CSO position with Rocksteady Boxing, I was also a professor at the University of Indianapolis in the Krannert School of Physical Therapy, where I taught all the clinical neuro courses. But part of my research agenda included studying balance and exercise in people with Parkinson's. So that's how I got to know Rocksteady Boxing about 12 years ago. So here I am. I get to work for them now, which is pretty cool. But enough about me. I am really excited to talk to you about how we can intentionally adapt exercise to really target some of the key motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease to get the most out of our workout. So here we go. Let me get this. All right. In keeping with my academic background, let's review some of the objectives for today. By the end of this talk, you will be able to identify the 4 cardinal motor symptoms of Parkinson's. That should be total review for all of you. You'll be able to describe 6 key motor deficits that should be targeted in each exercise or within an exercise program, not every one. You'll be able to identify at least 5 exercises I'm going to present that are safe and effective for people with Parkinson's, and how they can be modified to address folks no matter what level they're at. And then last, the biggest objective, my whole goal with doing this is to help you be able to analyze any exercise you're considering doing to help integrate and identify which key movement issues can be addressed within that exercise. So we're going to focus this discussion primarily on the motor symptoms that can be addressed with exercise. And you can see here a list of the most common ones, which include what we call TRAP, tremor, rigidity or stiffness, akinesia, which is difficulty moving, posture and instability. Other common motor symptoms include freezing of gait, shuffling gait, and dystonia, so those involuntary muscle-like spasms. But I think we can all agree that this is not a comprehensive list. But in an effort to condense and focus this talk a little bit, I'm really limiting us to a few key symptoms. Very, very briefly, if you are not already aware of the Parkinson's Foundation exercise recommendations for people with Parkinson's, here it is. This is on their website. It's a nice pamphlet that you can print up and keep. But I want to call your attention to the categories of exercise recommended. So you'll see here they include aerobic exercise, strength training, balance or agility, multitasking, and stretching. Now let's take a look at what the Academy of Neurologic Physical Therapy recommends. So I think you're going to see they're very similar. So note the categories right at the top: aerobic training, resistance training, balance training, and flexibility. This is yellow because all the blue boxes have substantial high quality evidence and are strongly recommended. And flexibility, we just haven't done enough research to really solidly endorse that as highly recommended, but I think common sense and all of us know improving range of motion flexibility is a good thing. But this recommendation, it's a physical therapy document. So it then gets into some specific things that PTs, traditionally specifically address, like gait and task-specific training, of course, but I'm not here to talk about PT. Look at this one in the middle, community-based exercise, right? The research is building for the benefits of bringing a group of people that fighting the same fight against Parkinson's. And they recognize the importance of continuing to improve health and fitness beyond the traditional healthcare system. That was my greatest frustration, being restricted within a hospital or a rehab hospital or outpatient. So coming across Rocksteady was a godsend, literally. I think Rocksteady really fills this major gap here. And clearly, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I believe in Rocksteady addresses all of the aforementioned categories. And if you're a boxer, you know we kick your butt in all of these categories, right? So today, I'm going to talk a very limited amount about boxing specific exercise. And instead, I want to talk about exercises that you probably do within your circuit training regimen. And they might be done within the workout or the warm-up or the cool down, but it's where we're typically doing the circuits. And there, I just thought, man, our coaches are so creative. I just love going to different gyms. I love watching what coaches come up with. I can't possibly come up with all the greatest, best exercises. So I picked a few key ones that I think we're going to find really helpful to analyze and carry forward with us when we are thinking what our workouts might be and thinking about what exercises might maximize our workout. You ready to go? All right, so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. The Rocksteady boxing method encourages all of our programs to incorporate these following principles here. Before we get into the specific exercises, I wanted to define some of the terms that I'm using on this slide, recognizing that those of you viewing include boxers, coaches, healthcare professionals. So, for instance, I've included the medical language such as hypokinesia, which means small amplitude movement, so that we can all be on the same page. So the 6 key movement deficits that we're going to be talking about today are hypokinesia, so small movements. We're going to talk about slowness of movement or speed of movement. We're going to talk about stiffness or rigidity, balance, of course, posture. And what I mean by posterior chain are the muscles on our backs, basically, our extensors. And then we're going to talk about a cognitive challenge, and I've stated that as multitasking. So we always want to include that. All right, now we're getting into the fun part. Now that we know what we're looking for, let's go through a few exercises and identify which symptoms or elements are being addressed within each exercise. And this is where I wish I was with you live so I could have a show of hands and kind of get your thoughts before I reveal the answers. But we'll make this work. All right. So your first assignment, this exercise is called a reverse plank. There are 2 common versions for this exercise. On the left, we have a boxer here at headquarters, start with his back against the wall. I have him bend his elbows 90 degrees, and I have him lift his hips away from the wall. His feet have to be at least 12 inches away so that he's engaging these muscles here. And this is a position that's intended to be held and focus on breathing. All right, similar to most of you have done a plank on the floor. Now, speaking of planks on the floor, this is another boxer, and she's got just her elbows touching down and just her heels. And in this position, you hold yourself up with a neutral knee and a neutral hip, and also importantly, a neutral neck position. People make a mistake and flex their head. Other common mistakes are allowing their knees to bend, their hips to bend, and their neck to bend. So think about it. What of the 6 elements, what do each of these address? Okay, I'll give you a second. And then I want you to also think about how the different position changes in this exercise affect the demands, because we want to get the benefits of these exercise regardless of a boxer's ability. So for some folks, it's going to be appropriate to be on the wall and others on the floor. You got something in mind? Okay. Of the 6 elements, this exercise addresses the posterior chain or posture. It does that because it basically activates every single extensor muscle in your shoulders, your core, your hips, right on down to your ankles. This exercise gets just about every muscle you need to stand up straighter and fight that gravity stooped posture, right? I would love to see this exercise performed much more often in our gyms and substituted for all of the push-ups that we do. I love push-ups, don't get me wrong, lots of benefits from push-ups, but they do tend to emphasize all of the muscles in the front. And right, we want to do those sparingly, and instead we want to do exercises that open us up and strengthen that posterior chain. As for differences in position, if you've never tried these, I encourage you, I think you can tell the floor plank requires much greater strength. Clearly, it requires you to get on the floor. And the wall plank is a great place to learn this exercise. It's easily accessed, it's less demanding. I like to add a challenge by adding a little bit of a press. So I let folks touch the wall and then press their elbows back, and then touch the wall and press their elbows back. So that's an active way you can do that exercise. All right, great exercise. Love this one. Okay. Well, some of these just start when I click. Let me wait. Okay, the kayaking exercise is shown here. I'll start by showing you my demonstration. I'm the model in the middle, and this will give you an idea of what it's intended to look like. And then I'll show you one of our boxers at headquarters perform it in 2 different positions. Okay, go ahead and go. Up with, well, I think I could show it at the same time. Really pull the water back behind you, come up, stand up tall. Okay, so you can see me going through the full motion. It's just like you're paddling a canoe. Whoop. I don't know why I did that. And then here's her sitting. This is a modified version, basically just like you're sitting in a kayak. Pull the water back. And that was my cue. Up. And pull the water back with that right hand and go up. Pull the water back with the left hand. Okay, so I will preface this by saying she doesn't have quite the motion that I'm looking for, and when we're in a group setting, we can't stand there and cue every single boxer. So I would probably make this so that she can't do it wrong. I would put a bench in front of her, something where she has to lift the pole over instead of just taking it right across her body. But let's analyze this one. I love it. Look at this. This one has the potential to address every element. So hypokinesia, because the pole requires folks to keep their hands apart and encourages big paddle strokes. It addresses rigidity. We're moving the shoulders and the trunk through range of motion. Posture, requiring that trunk to extend and reach up. Instability can be addressed or balanced by just having your boxer stand, or even stand on a foam pad like she was. She had that down. She was super stable. We can add dual task or multitasking complexity if we ask them to move the paddle at a specific motion, keeping balance. So that is inherently dual tasking. We can add speed to this. Come on, we're talking about rowing. Have you heard of a coxswain? So you can add a metronome. They're row, 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 right? So you can have them do it to timing to speed them up. We have a lot of good research that endorses an auditory cue. So that could be a lot of fun. So to modify this, you could have them sit on an exercise ball, on a chair, stand firm, stand on a foam. You can also add a cognitive challenge by naming things, or, you could even add weight to the paddle if you really want to torture people, right? Put weights on the actual rod. You didn't hear that from me. I'm sure your coaches are much meaner than I would ever be. Okay. So here are some examples of a trunk twist in different positions. At Rock Steady Boxing at headquarters, we typically do something like this in our warm-up. This is not a video here. Let me stop this video. This is like in our warm-up, we lay down on the ground, swing knees to one side, and with our arms outstretched to stretch, and then we bring the arm over and then bring it back to this open position. So, whoops. So that's a nice warm-up kind of range of motion activity. We also do this one. A lot of folks do this one. This one might be new to you. Maybe not. This is a boxer standing against the wall. He's trying to reach his other hand. But the cue for this, all of these, for the floor and the wall, the cue is to always return the back of your hand to the wall or to the floor. You want that sensory touch, that feedback of what the original position is, and that really tends to help folks. So 4 out of 6 ain't bad, right? This addresses hypo or amplitude of movement, right? Because we're asking and encouraging larger amplitude of movement using the wall or the floor as the sensory cue for how far to go. Clearly, it's addressing rigidity and flexibility, encouraging trunk rotation. In standing, we're addressing instability in those weight shifts that we mentioned. My boxer there was having a harder time weight shifting. You see, he kept his feet kind of flat, and I really wanted him to weight shift better and twist his hips. So he's got a little work to do. But since I didn't mention, since the talk is focused on motor symptoms, I didn't mention the importance of the sensory system, but I do want to say that adding any sensory cue to these exercises, so adding touch and targets and visuals, really helps people know how big they're moving and where they're going. So I think that's the benefit of boxing too, right? You're hitting a bag or a speed bag, you're touching something, so you know if you're successful. Same thing with all these exercises. If you can move to a target, that really helps folks move through their range of motion. Sorry, you got to put up with me on this one. So people call this exercise a variety of different things. I visualize it as a clock. So this is what I call a lunge clock. So you can see I'm standing in the middle. That's my home base. And then I take 1 foot and lunge to the cone or the numbers on a clock. Lots of variations we can do with this exercise. Okay, and the other motion is just sit to stand. It's a very low chair. I'm standing on a foam pad, and to make it extra challenging. So these are both fairly challenging activities, and they have the ability to be challenged, to be adapted, I should say, to just about anyone. But in general, These exercises address 4 out of the 6 elements. So hypokinesia, that smallness, can be addressed in the lunge task by asking your folks to step to a designated target. Remember, I said that sensory piece is important. So instead of just randomly saying step in all directions, stepping to tape on a floor or to a target will really help increase amplitude. It clearly works on instability. Both of those do. Standing on foam, even just standing up on firm surface for some of our folks is going to be a challenge. Posture and posterior chain, the reason I have that on there is because they both strengthen that posterior chain, that extensor group of muscles. Standing up, as you lean forward and stand up, addresses those back muscles are strengthening, the hip and the quads are strengthened. And then in the lunging, the quads and the hip extensors are being worked on. Task complexity, wow, that lunge activity, you can make that really fun. If you've got technology, you can of course use things like Blaze Pods, but there's also phone apps that ask you to step in different directions with different timing and ask you to react. But you could have a partner go 3, 6, 9, 1, and have reaction be integrated within it. There are a ton of different ways to add task complexity. You can have them hold a ball, and when they lunge, touch a target, again, sensory, touch a partner, touch the ball each time. So coaches are really creative. I'm not really concerned about coming up with fun stuff to do. Okay, a couple more boxers at our headquarters. I call this cross knee marching. Oops. So cross knee marching, hands held high. In this case, I have noodles, and they're marching and walking and touching the opposite knee. Let me tell you, that's about the 3rd or 4th take on that video, because even these guys, which do it, they do it pretty good. They needed some practice. So I said, what I always say is, hey, you guys, if you could do it perfect, I would just pick something harder anyway. So, so they're troopers. But this one also could get 6 out of the 6 elements. So it addresses small amplitude movement, right? By raising the arms up, and the noodles I put in the hands because why? Sensory information. They're holding something long. They know if that's up in the air or if it's down here. So it's that extra sensory information. So amplitude, it could address speed if you have them marching to a certain time. There are benefits to going very slow when you march, because that's more balance. And then there are benefits to going fast, right? To get rhythm and coordination involved. So you get to pick. Flexibility and rigidity. When you have those arms upheld tight, up high, right? We're stretching out the shoulders. We're moving the hips and knees through full range of motion. So I love that. Balance, we already mentioned. Posture, right? I'm going all the way back to the starting position and extension. And task complexity. It's a hard one. It's always a hard one to keep track of which hand goes where and with timing. So it's inherently a very challenging one to coordinate. So I gave you a couple ideas. If you really want to challenge folks more, you can add a cognitive task, a naming task, a counting task, something like that. All right, I got my girl, Christy Rose, doing an awesome demonstration of jump rope. She is incredible. I'm just in awe every time I watch her. So this video will also show boxers with adaptations to jumping rope. I'm sure you guys probably already do all of this. Sorry, there we go. She's just showing off here. Oh, wait, it didn't show the whole thing. Wonder why that is. Here we go. She's showing off too. Look at her crisscrossing. Let me point out a couple things. She's got a full rope she's showing off with. And then here we go. So this is just stepping over the rope. It's a nice way to not have to include the upper extremities. Putting the rope in one hand. This rope is cut, so doing both components, but still jumping, still swinging. And then this gentleman is putting it all together. But boxers can modify this based on their own ability. Okay. So you already saw the modifications that I have kind of listed out here on the slide. Jumping rope definitely addresses the amplitude of movement. So you've got to swing your arms. If you don't swing them big enough, you're going to hit yourself in the head with the rope, right? Or you're going to catch it on your foot. Speed and agility, it definitely addresses speed. Balance, that's the big one. Just having to jump in place is hard enough, right? And then task complexity, it's a lot to think about. And it's inherently what we call a dual task, which is it has an upper extremity activity that we can do independently of a jumping activity. So we've just combined these two tasks. And if you've ever tried to jump rope, you can see some boxers have the ability to do the arms and have the ability to jump. But when you put them together, it's a challenge. So that's exactly what we need to keep in our programs and keep working on. All right, this one is one of my favorites. I'm going to hold here. And I'll show you the video because it has a lot of possibilities for variation. And when you look at this, these are both boxers. So this is a circuit where they're both getting some benefit. When the round bell goes off, they're going to switch positions. So this exercise is intended for both boxers to switch roles. I think she's feeling the burn on her legs. So she's getting lower and lower. Okay. All right. So on this one, I broke it down for the sitting box, for the wall sitting boxer and the standing boxer. And for the wall sitting boxer, we're addressing amplitude of movement by having them take the medicine ball and reach above their head, right? And then to their chest or reach around to each side. We're having them address flexibility, right? Their shoulders, and doing the trunk rotation motion is going to be addressing flexibility. Posterior chain, doing a wall sit works your butt muscle and your quads, and those are your extensors. And then your back is against the wall, so you're using those extensor muscles back there. Definitely task complexity. If you saw her when she received the ball, she had to think about, am I touching here? Oh, I got to touch here and keep track of my partner and throw the ball while staying in position. The standing boxer, definitely balance, right? He's sidestepping. Agility, we can, that balance and agility or instability is addressed. If we make a move faster, so the speed can be addressed by having them chase the rabbit, or just walk. It can be made easier if we just have our partner stand there, right? So depending on your boxer's ability. And then task complexity. They're supposed to be doing two things at once. A ball activity, which again can be done separately from the sidestepping activity. That's what makes it dual task. Oh, and this is a fun video. So we're just about wrapping up. I always have to show that. That always moves me. I've been around the gym for so long, and I still watch all these things, and it touches me. So, so you can hopefully within that video, you got a better picture of the whole workout for those of you that may not be familiar. But I also hope that with some of the exercises you watched, you could go, oh, that's working posterior chain. That's getting balance. That's getting speed. And now say, okay, how can we purposely introduce exercises that are addressing each of these components? And one exercise doesn't have to address each of them, okay? You might have circuits that address a variety of them, but you probably want to avoid a workout that addresses only the same one. So I thought I'd put this slide together as a visual and to show you what exercises address which components. Clearly, there are some that hit every component, right? That's great. But it doesn't mean you don't want to do exercises that address only one thing. because they're so incredibly beneficial and functional. You kind of have to now think about how you might integrate it within your 60 or 90-minute workouts. So hopefully I'll make this available to you. I do have a handout and I can share and pass to you, so you have some of this in writing. So let's revisit our objectives. What are the key takeaways? You should be able to identify TRAP, right? Tremor, rigidity, akinesia, posture, instability, right? When you leave here, you have been familiarized with symptoms that can be addressed through the intentional selection of specific exercises within the context of our guidelines. And now you know what those specific elements are that we need to integrate within the exercises. And last, I think you could be able to generate some ideas as to how you might modify an exercise you already really know and love and do to make it also address some of these issues. So I hope our mission has been accomplished today. And thank you so much for inviting me. I don't know our format, if it lends itself well to passing on questions in the chat or opening it up. I'll do whatever you think is reasonable or efficient or what have you. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And if you have any questions, you can get online and ask me, or your moderator can. If not, that's all I have for you. Let me see where the chat is. We have a question. Okay. And I saw, I could kind of tell where my video was freezing a little bit. I think when I played a video and then tried to talk, it was freezing. So I tried to, hopefully that worked out better when I shut my mouth when a video was playing. So when we talk about how often, let me go back to my slide here. So the question about how often, so in a rock steady boxing class, we integrate aerobic exercise with strengthening, with balance, with agility. And as a researcher, that's what makes it so darn hard to study, because we mesh it all together. The world of research, because we have to control for everything, does it all separately. So it says, if you want to only work aerobically, then you should do that 3 times a week, right? And if you only want to do strength training, like with weights, you should do that 2 to 3 times a week. And then you should do balance 2 to 3 times a week. Well, if you're coming to rock steady boxing classes, you're getting all this in the program. And if you come 2 to 3 times a week, you're meeting all of the criteria. So I hope that answers that question. But the Parkinson's Foundation website has the specifics on how often. Let me go back to, what are some of my favorite home balance exercises? So when I have folks working on balance at home, I almost always have you back up to the corner of a room, because then you have a wall behind you on either side, so you can challenge yourself a little bit safely. So there are a couple different kinds of balance, and you can gauge what works best for you. I like, the exercise, the cross marching. I like having folks practice that one just standing in place. That's one of my favorites because it requires you to lift your leg and tap the knee, come back, put the leg down. Doing it slowly is a single leg balance challenge, which I really like. And that sensory component. So if I had to pick one, which there's a million, that's one of my favorites. And if you can't raise your arms overhead, just putting your hands out in front of you and tapping your knee to it is a really nice challenge. Let's see if I got any more. It's a good question. So I think you'll find too that I spoke a lot about these exercises that we do in the context of a boxing workout, but I think quite a few of them are modifiable for home. Let's see. Anything else? Okay, no more questions. All right, I will email the hard copy of my handout so that you can have access to that. And I believe the folks there have my email address. Oh, hold on. Okay. One last question. Is there such a thing as overdoing it? Sure. So in general, I just encourage you to listen to your own body. Muscles are going to get sore when you work them. And when you exercise, we talk a lot about your breathing and your heart rate. If that's not being measured, because a lot of us don't measure, you should be exercising to where you're a little breathless, but you could still answer questions from somebody near you. So that's a guide for intensity. When you exercise, it shouldn't be painful. It should be hard and challenging, but it shouldn't be painful. So those are a couple things I go by. And then the next day, see if you have some what we call delayed onset muscle soreness. That's normal, but it should go away in a day or two before you come back and do your workout. In general, as far as a precaution for people with Parkinson's, it's not the Parkinson's disease specifically that puts you at risk for, a cardiac event, for instance. And there's nothing neurologically that prevents you from working hard as far as Parkinson's goes. It typically is some of the other medical conditions that folks with Parkinson's have. So if you have a heart condition or an orthopedic condition, something like that, you're going to also have to follow the guidelines for those conditions and modify a little bit. I hope that answered your question. Okay. All right, so we're recording for posterity. Thanks again for having me. And it was a real joy. I wish I could have been there in person. My family drove right through Bloomington today, and I couldn't meet them there because of other obligations. So they waved to you all. So take care, guys.